What's up guys, Zioku here. Today we're going to be making a tier list for Alice Fiction. Just to give some credentials, my name is Zioku. I am rank 79. I'm also part of the team Beaters. Beaters is one of the top North American teams currently in the game. I'm also the currently the person in charge of updating the database on MeowDB. If you haven't checked out the MeowDB database, I'll leave a link into the description below. But it just gives an information of all the units so you can see the units, see their stats, see what their abilities are. This will give you a brief summary of what kind of team comps they can work with. They also have the world memories as well. So if you want some world memory information, that is there. I have not gotten around to updating all of those yet. And it has other useful links, some guides, some tutorials. A lot of these are kind of outdated at this point, but they are a good starting point. Alright, so to start off the tier list here, we have Nance. Let's go here, character. Wrong one. So Nance is a light special attack attacker. She hits very hard. I'm going to grade these not necessarily on their default ascension, but with a couple ascensions behind them and with the right team around them. I think Nance is actually a very good unit. She definitely isn't S tier, but I think Nance is going to be A tier. There are a lot of good units in Alice Fiction, so a lot of them are. I feel like the A tier is going to be pretty heavy. S tier might be a little bit light. B and C tier. For D, we're going to put as a niche tier. Not necessarily bad, but they have to be serving a specific purpose. We'll go on to Bismarck next. Bismarck is an AoE. He's an AoE debuffer for physical teams. So most of his abilities decrease the physical defense of enemies, and all of them. So he's good in AoE content. Bismarck is pretty good, and when you pair him with a unit like Ushi Wakamaru, just gonna say Ushi. When you pair him with her AoE abilities, they work really well. An interesting thing about Bismarck and Ushi is that you can stack their debuffs. A lot of units, if they have the same type of debuff, they don't stack, but in this case, Ushi and Bismarck's debuffs are different enough that they do stack. Giles. I'm going to put Giles in B tier. She's a very good unit, but she's also a bit niche. So Giles is an earth unit. As you can see, I've max graded my Giles because I do really think that she is a good unit. Her 1, 2, and 3 are very niche. So her crash, you need to go versus defense type. Her skill 1 is debuff type, and her skill 2 is recovery type. And so these slayers are very effective when you get them off, but the main reason Giles is good is because of her passive. When there are 3 or more earth allies, you boost your physical attack by X amount. And the amount is actually very, very good. It's about the amount that most buffers actives are, but it's a passive. So that is, and so you're always getting that. She pairs really well with Qin Huang or QSH in Lancelot. So Giles with these two units are really good. On her own, if you're not utilizing her passive, then I would put her in C tier if you were not utilizing her passive. But in the right comp, she's definitely B. Might argue A, but I'm going to put her in B. The next one, PYG Pygmalion. I don't want to call her Pig, but that's what it's going to have to look like. Pig is a special attack buffer. She does not a ton of damage. She boosts the special attack of allies and special defense. She grants a barrier. Barriers are kind of useless in Alice Fiction, so that is kind of a low graded ability. And then when there are 3 or more special attack type enemies, boost special attack. So this is kind of a niche situation, having 3 or more special type enemies. It's also interesting that this needs more than one enemy, while her crash skill only is affecting one enemy. So since she herself is not an AoE enemy, but she wants multiple enemies versus here, she might be the first C tier unit. I don't think she's the great. She's a great pick. In terms of special buffers, we have Rose, who is a really good pick, but she'll be in C. The next unit is Achilles. Achilles is a fire attacker, but all of their skills are focused around Wood Slayer. I'm going to put Achilles in niche. Achilles isn't necessarily a bad unit if you are facing wood enemies. The damage on Achilles is okay, but every ability is focused on doing damage or reducing damage to wood enemies. And there aren't really a lot of wood enemies in the game that we have to worry about, so she's going to go niche. Normal Neyu. Normal Neyu I'm going to put in B tier. Neyu is actually a pretty decent starting off unit. If you start the game and you start using Neyu, there's really nothing wrong with that. Her biggest downfall is that she does split damage, so she does her damage on 2 units instead of just 1 or all units. The issue with that is most content, it's all or nothing. There's either 4 units on the field and you want to take care of them quickly, or there's a boss unit and you want to take the boss unit down quickly. Because her damage is split, she does a little bit less damage than most single target characters. Her abilities are pretty good. They all just boost her attack, and this one can boost the attack of a high physical ally as well. This one lengthens the panel, which is pretty nice. And then this one, when there are 4 allies, there's almost always 4 allies, give her an attack buff. So Neyu is a pretty good unit overall. Solari. So before we go into Solari, let's talk about the composition of Wang Gang. So Wang Gang includes Solari, Wang, Cleopatra, and either Rose, Goth, or the healer Ecclesias. These 4 right here are considered to be the strongest team in the game. So all 4 of them combined is an S tier team. It is absolutely the best team in the game. This team comp right here, it is just so strong. You can do all of the story, most underground, PvP, any type of events. This team right here will beat bosses. It'll beat everything. So the team comp itself is S tier. Individually, the units that carry the team, Wang and Cleo are S tier. Wang is an AoE debuffer, and her debuffs are insane, while Cleo is an AoE special attacker, and her damage is pretty good, even at default Ascension. This team is very good. You don't have to raise their Ascension. As you can see, my Solari is still 2 stars. My Wing is only 3 stars. I ascended Rose once, but I did get Cleo to 5 stars. If these units were more easily farmable, they would all probably be 5 stars because of how good they are. But Wing and Rose are story mode, and getting story mode shards is a nightmare. And Solari is, I believe, from Team. And so she's a low priority for me. She might be Team or PvP. We can check real quick. She's from PvP. So she's a little bit lower priority for me. But these two are S tier. I would put Solari at B tier. She doesn't really do too much for the team. The only reason why the comp is like that is because of Wang's passive. Wang's passive requires 2 wood, so her and Rose or Goth or Ecclesiap, and 2 earth, Cleo and Solari. There's really not a lot of other good earth units that are special. The only other one you have is Yuri, and Yuri is a very niche unit. So if one day we get a better special earth unit, Solari would 100% be switched out. But for now, she's decent. Rose is really good in that comp as well. She's a special buffer, but she can fit in other compositions as well, not just Wang Gang. She's very flexible if you have a special team. She just boosts special attack with her crash, boosts special attack with her skill 1, and she boosts special attack with her passive as well. So very useful unit all around. And then she does physical attack type Slayer. This could be good in arena. Most defense units are physical attacks. So if you're going against Bankai in arena, then she's a really great unit for that. Goth, I'm going to put Goth in high B, so above Giles. Goth is part of that Wang Gang, and she's kind of the budget Wang Gang if you don't have Rose. Rose is a 3-star, while Goth is a 2-star. She is decent. She has good synergy with Cleo. She can convert 5 of her own panel into Cleo's panel, and then Cleo can use her skill 2 to wipe all of the panels and have a higher special attack buff. Plus, she's getting a special or a physical defense buff with that. This would increase her crash skill, and this does okay damage to 2 enemies, which isn't terrible. She is decent for PvP if you're going against teams that are attacking type teams, because she reduces damage for the first 2 turns, and normally in PvP the first 2 turns are the most important. Ecclesiap. She's actually one of the few characters I don't have unlocked. I've got 92 shards of her, and she's probably going to stay that way for a little while. She's a healer. She's one of the best healers in the game. If healing was valued a little bit higher, I would put her higher. But I think she's just going to be in B behind Goth. She's a good healer. She works well in this comp. If you don't have Goth or Rose, you can throw her. She's also useful in Underground in that team comp because she can heal. But there's really nothing special to say about her. She's an okay unit, but there are better choices for that Wang composition. Wang Gang. Longius. Let's see. Longius. Longinus? We'll just call her Long. She is a physical attacker, and she mainly single target. She converts her own panels, or she converts allies' panels into her panels, and then she converts her own panels into level 1 skill panels, and then she also does crash damage boosting as well for each skill panel broken. So initially her crash damage looks pretty low, but once you start doing a bunch of crash skill breaks, her crash damage will go up, and then she does more damage. She's a good unit. I don't think she is a great unit compared to some of the other physical attackers. Her attribute being light is kind of awkward in some situations. There's a lot of earth support, there's a lot of fire support, but we don't have a lot of just pure light support. So at least for physical. So she's just kind of an okay physical attacker. I thought the A was going to be a little bit heavier, but the B tier is kind of pretty heavy as well. Perseus. Oh, Perseus. Where to put you? Perseus is an earth defense unit, and in this particular game, defense isn't the greatest, but there are some content where defense helps out a ton. Not in the candy hunt, but one of the team hunts before that, the team hunt boss hit like a freaking truck, and you had to have a defense unit. In that situation, Perseus was really useful. She was probably A tier, because running her just allowed you to deal the most damage in that team hunt. She's also pretty good in arena as well, but the last team hunt she wasn't very useful, and so that kind of leaves her only use into arena defense. So I'm going to put Perse at B tier. It's not a bad idea to raise her up, but right now she currently isn't that useful. Anderson, if you were part of the recent event that happened in October, everybody got Anderson to 5 stars as long as you were playing every day for the whole event, and it was like a 3-week event, so it was kind of a long event, but everybody got Anderson to 5 star. I'm going to put Anderson straight up into the A tier. Her passive is really, really good. And she's good on both physical and special teams, which is kind of nuts. She's a special unit, and her damage is decent, but she decreases the physical defense and special defense of enemies from her passive just by default. And then both of these skills also further decrease special defense and special physical defense, as well as the attacks. The attack debuff doesn't really matter in most situations, but the defense debuff is what makes her just really good. This unit, I always forget her name. Amadeus. Amadeus is a debuff unit that has a lot of bind. She really isn't that great of a unit. When there are one or more dark enemies, that's pretty niche. I'm gonna put Amadeus in C tier. Another unit that I always forget their name. Let's see. Sharizoton? Shari. We'll call her Shari. Shari is another one of those very niche units. She has bombs. She actually, looking at her skill set, is something that I might play with one day. One of the nice things about Alice Fiction is you can really play around with different units and different comps. Even if they're kind of niche, you can still mess around with them and not lose out on too much. Materials and grade ups and XP are all kind of easy to acquire, so you can invest in a unit and not feel like you wasted a ton of material. But she is definitely going to go down into C tier. Suitor. Suitor is an AoE fire unit. At the start of the game, a lot of people were saying that Suitor was, one of a great unit in the fire composition. She does okay AoE damage. She burns the enemies with this oil and then gives Oil Slayer to your allies. Well, gives Oil Slayer to self. And then she paired very well with Antoinette. Yeah, she paired well with Antoinette. And it was just kind of a nice comp there. There are better comps, and there were better comps at the beginning of the game. But she's just okay now. I'm going to put her in B tier. Hannibal. Oof. I don't know if I want to drop her so low as T, C, or niche. Hannibal is a virus applying unit. Virus is just damage over time, and it's just not too good. The damage is kind of negligible, and I don't believe Hannibal does a group buff with the virus. She's just inflicting that virus. Yeah, so she's just dealing virus. If she gave Virus Slayer, it might be a different story, but just because she's only inflicting the virus and all of her damage comes from virus, she's going to go down here. I believe this is Andromeda, and Andromeda is going to go into C tier. She is a fire. If there are fire ally or enemies, this is where kind of her passive activates. And then she just buffs physical defense and buffs special defense. That is not really useful in most content. You want to be killing the enemies and not buffing your defenses. Maybe niche. Now we'll put her in C. Bankai. Bankai is interesting. So Bankai is phenomenal in arena defense. If you are running a physical comp and you go versus Bankai, chances are you're going to lose. Her first one makes her the self of a target and then boosts her physical defense. The boost isn't high, but her physical defense naturally is really high. Then on turn 2, she activates this ability. This ability has a 40% chance to inflict bind when you attack her. So if you attack her and you're a physical unit, there is a 40% chance that you'll be binded. And then there's also world memories that increase that chance, but that bind just destroys you. So I would say Bankai is in arena defense, plus she has some niche applications in Team Hunt. When the Team Hunt boss was, again, physically or did a ton of damage, Bankai was useful there for damage mitigation. Vivian, I'm going to put Vivian into B tier. I don't think she's above Solari. I think Solari is up here. She's better than Longigis. Vivian is she's a debuff unit that inflicts virus, so kind of like Hannibal, but unlike Hannibal she gives Virus Slayer, and the Slayer buff is just a very strong buff, and her passive and her skill 3 are both that Virus Slayer buff, which is really good. There is a world memory that allows her virus to last as long as the cooldown. So instead of 3 turns, it would last 4 turns. And that's a good world memory for her, so your Virus Slayer is always active. I think she would be a little bit better. She's actually a physical unit, which is weird. If she was a special attack unit, I think she would be just slightly better. She would probably still be B tier, but on the higher end of the B tier. Yuri is niche. She is anti-water, so versus water enemies, she is really good. The main application that Yuri currently has is for Underground Wizard. So the Underground Wizard boss, I can't go there because I've already completed it, is a water boss, and he's actually kind of one of the strongest enemies that you can currently face daily in the game, and a lot of people they hit their wall once they get to that enemy, Yuri is very good in that enemy because she mitigates water damage, she increases damage to water, as well as gives Water Slayer for her passive. Since she's Earth, she pairs really well with that Earth squad. So Yuri plus Lancelot plus QSH plus Giles. So she does have some niche application versus water teams. Jack the Ripper. I'm going to put Jack the Ripper in C tier. Jack the Ripper, you have to build a comp around Jack the Ripper. All of her skills give her status abnormality slayer, damage over time slayer, bind slayer, and then just a physical attack buff. So she gets all these slayers, but she doesn't do any of these things. So she can't activate any of these abilities herself. So she needs allies that can give status abnormality plus damage over time plus bind to really maximize her skill set. She might be useful if you build around her and you max ascend her, but for now I'm going to put her at C tier. Oh, Robin Hood. I have my Robin Hood max ascended, but I never use her. She's a crit booster, so she decreases crit resistance from enemies as well as boost your crit resist on allies and boost your attack a little bit as well. But man, she isn't good. Since she's a buffer, and buffers can just universally be useful, especially if you have to have 6 team comps, like the latest team hunt, you had to have 6 teams, she can find a use in a team. Joan's going to be on the higher end of B here. Joan is a physical attack buffer. She has an interesting requirement for her abilities. She needs dark allies and buff allies. So if you can stack her with a bunch of dark buff allies, her passive and her active both get benefits from that. So her passive, there only needs to be 2 or more buff type allies, so 1 including herself and then 1 other buff ally. But her active skills get stronger the more buff and dark type allies there are. If you could have a comp of 4 dark buff physical attack allies, this would be just like insane. But since there's really not a lot of compositions that can fully utilize this, she just does a pretty decent job at buffing. Herc is a tank, useful in some team hunt scenarios, but not too useful. We're going to put Herc in B tier. Hippocrates is a healer, and she uses her crash skill to heal. So I'm going to put her in C tier because having a unit that you have to focus on their crash skill is not that great. I know her name, but I can't remember off the top of my head. Nightingale. She's another healer, single target healer. Nice thing about her is her cooldown is only 1 turn. But healers are not that useful. She can be at the top of the C tier. Galen, another healer, not that useful, right next to Nightingale. Mathers. I think depending on who you ask, Mathers is going to be in a different position. I'm going to put her in B tier. She increases... Mathers changes her panels into crash skills of other units. So you can get a level 3 and a level 1 crash skill instantly. Both of those effects are pretty good. And then this is kind of niche. Her passive you're almost never going to activate. But increasing physical defense, increasing special defense, those are pretty niche as well. It's just the crash skills that you're doing for her. Ushi. I would love to put Ushi in A tier, but I think I'm going to put her at the top of B tier, and she's probably going to stay at the top of B tier. Ushi is a physical AoE attacker. If you start out with her, she can carry you through most of the story, but eventually she falls off. And the Wang team, Wang Gang is just so much stronger than any physical AoE composition. But Wang Gang not only is good versus AoE, is also good versus single target, where most Ushi comps kind of just fall off there. Kenshin. I'm going to put Kenshin. She is going to be... Oh, I don't own her. She's a defense unit that just reduces damage. I don't believe she has a taunt, which is really kind of bad. So she's going to be at the bottom of C tier because she doesn't have a taunt. This boy. Scipio. Scipio? We're going to go... He's a defense that has actually pretty decent damage reduction. He can go high C tier. The damage reduction is really nice. Himeko. I'm going to put Himeko. It might be my bias. I'm going to put her at the bottom of B tier. While she is a healer, like all these other healers, she can reduce healing on enemies, which has some niche applications versus some bosses that heal themselves. If you can get that ability off. Himeko is also the only unit that you must use actual money to buy, and so that's kind of a downside to her, but I'm not really going to count that against her. She's going to be in B tier. Archimedes. She is... I really like Archimedes. She's a special attacker. She's kind of like Neo or Neu, where she splits her damage for between two different enemies. She has an insane special attack self buff passive. So just buffing herself by 8,000 the entire game, no restrictions. I feel like they could have just given her more special attack here, but and then her active one is another special attack buff. She does okay damage, so I would put her in behind Ushi. They're kind of together. Both are okay at what they do. Summer units. I've got these here twice, but here we'll put the third one. Summer Anderson. Summer Anderson is a good unit, but they're very niche. They're only good versus light and dark units. So whether it's a physical light or dark or a special light or dark, it doesn't matter. They decrease the physical attack and physical defense of light and dark units. Actually, it looks like it's just physical. So physical light and dark units is where Summer Vacation Anderson really shines. Summer Neu. I'm going to put her above Joan. Summer Neu is a buffing unit. Let's show her off real quick. Her physical attack buff isn't nearly as high as Joan's attack buff is, but she converts one regular skill panel to a level 1 crash, which is already pretty nice, and gives a 17.55% chance for regular panels to appear more often of that selected unit. This is actually kind of insane. When you're doing your crashes, it is actively noticeable, and it really increases your damage if you give this skill onto your DPS. She also lengthens the time, which is kind of nice, but Joan also lengthens the time, so it's not like that's something that she has over Joan. And then she just deals okay amount of damage herself. Summer, this is Summer Andromeda. She's a healer. I don't put a lot of weight or value into healers, so she'll go with the other healers. You know, we'll move Hippo with the healers as well, just because all the healers can chill together. Ooh, two big ones. I mean, Kojiro's actually pretty decent as well. This whole lineup is nice. Lancelot, Musashi. We're going to put Lancelot in S tier. I don't think Lancelot is the best physical attacker in the game, but versus Underground Wizard 1, Lancelot is definitely the best unit to go versus Underground Wizard 1. I think every player should get Lancelot for their free roll, just so you can farm Underground Wizard 1 as soon as possible. Underground Wizard drops these coins, and so Underground, you can max out your Lancelot, you can max out your Musashi, you can max out your Archimedes. All of these units are really good. Giles and Robin Hood are also here. And Underground just has a lot of good units, and you want to be able to do Underground as soon as possible. Because you want to do Underground as soon as possible, I'm going to put her in S tier at the top, just so you can farm Underground. Now, for all other single target bosses that aren't water, Musashi is the best unit for that. I don't know. It doesn't really matter their positioning up here too greatly, but I think I'm going to put her behind the Wang Gang, just because Wang Gang is useful through almost all of the game, while Musashi is just going to be useful for bosses. But versus bosses, Musashi is insane. Her damage is just insane. Her two skills here synergize really well, converting all the panels into her own panel and increasing the time, which is really nice, as well as converting that into a huge attack buff. And then her passive, she's a little bit selfish. She wants to be the only attack type on the team. But she is just very, very good. Kojiro, this is going to be an A tier unit. She's a great buffer. I'm going to put her over here. She's a great physical attack buffer. Back here. She's a great physical attack buffer. But there is a better physical attack buffer. And she's kind of selfish because you really do want to activate her crash. But she's just a good buffing unit overall. Michelangelo B. I don't know where the B comes from in his name. He is... If you are running Wang Gang and you see Michelangelo B in arena defense, avoid that team like the plague. Michelangelo B is a special defense buffer, so in arena he is insane. I'm going to put him in niche because outside of arena defense versus Wang Gang, he doesn't have any use. But versus arena defense Wang Gang, he is just insane. So if there's ever an AoE special defense comp that is destroying you, put Michelangelo on your team and you're perfectly fine. That is that Antoinette? Yeah, that's Antoinette. Antoinette is okay. She boosts the fire. If you are an all fire team, she can boost your attack decently. But she really isn't that good. I'm going to put her in C tier. Fire is a good composition, but she really only has the one buff. She's not that great. Now we're going to go to Wayland. Wayland, do you have a taunt? Wayland does not have a taunt, and she is a defense unit. Defense unit without a taunt, I'm going to put in C. There's really no point in a defense unit without a taunt if they're not taking damage away from your other allies. So I'm going to be a little biased here with Captain Drake. I have my Captain Drake at 5 stars. She is a pretty useful unit. She starts off, I think, at 1 or even 2 stars, but she deals a ton of damage. 54,000 on her crash skill. Compare that to Musashi's crash at 52,000, 52.8, and Lancelot's crash is actually really low at 37,000. But Lancelot ignores defense, which is really nice. her crash is the highest among the 3 single target physical attack units. The issue is she doesn't have a lot of buffs. Her buffs are all around crit damage, so crit damage, and then critical chance. When she crits versus high level enemies, she does great damage. She's actually better than Lancelot versus most team hunt bosses, but Musashi is still better. So I'm going to put her in A tier. We'll put her above Nance. QSH, he is a physical attack single target debuffer, and he's amazing. Phenomenal unit. Start the game with QSH if you can roll for him. Get Lancelot for your free roll, QSH just on your random quartz that you have. Fantastic unit. Faust. Faust is one of the other few units that I don't have. From what I hear from people in Discord, people in my guild, she's not that great. Faust is mainly used versus light enemies. She has Light Slayer, boost her own special attack. She's very selfish. She wants to be on low HP. I can't put her in C tier because she's an attack type, but she's going to be pretty low in the B tier. We'll put her behind Vivian. I want to put her behind Long. I think Long has more usefulness than Faust. We're going to save this one for later. And then we'll look at Toshizo. Toshizo is another unit that I don't have. She is a buff unit. It says buff, but she's actually kind of a DPS unit disguised as a buff unit. There has to be 1 or less buff type unit and 1 or less earth. So she can be the only earth and buff unit on your squad. So you can't have any other buffers. You can have debuffers though. And she gives self decreased stat slayer. She increases her own crash skill. And for 3 turns she decreases their physical defense. So she'll decrease their physical defense. That will proc this, giving her decreased stat slayer. And then for 3 turns give a decreased stat slayer again to herself and reduce current HP of a different ally. So she's okay. She's going to be at the bottom of B tier, I think. She really isn't that useful. Witch Cleo. I really like Witch Cleo. There's actually a really good team hunt composition that I made with her. Her crash, the damage over time slayer, this is the one slayer that she has that's kind of useless. But all the other slayers that she gives, this one is curse slayer, and then she curses 70% chance, but most likely will curse the enemy. Give status abnormality slayer, that's pretty good. And then another status abnormality slayer. So I'm going to rate Witch Cleo pretty high. I'm going to put her in A tier. She's a good, even though she says debuff, she's a good buffer. Because she's giving all these slayers to your enemies. So she's a debuff unit, but she's actually buffing your allies with all these slayers. The only reason why she's debuff, I guess, is the curse. Wolf Girl Antoinette. She's going to be S tier behind Musashi. She is a phenomenal debuff unit. If you were able to pull her, she's a limited Halloween unit like Witch Cleo. If you're able to pull her, she's just fantastic. She pairs well with QSH, so her active physical defense debuffs stack with QSH, but her crash does not stack. So if you're going to use her as a damage unit, you want her in the very back of the comp so she doesn't overwrite QSH's crash skill. But she's just kind of an insane unit, really good all around. Definitely an S tier unit. Gwen is another S tier unit. She is a buffing unit, and at max buffs, if you're able to utilize all of her requirements here, she is the highest physical attack buffer in the game. She stacks with Joan on this ability, so her and Joan kind of conflict if you're using this ability. And then she stacks with anything that converts panels, this one. And there are a couple of characters who do that. But in terms of just pure physical attack buffs, Gwen is the best unit for that. Ghost Amadeus. Ghostly Amadeus is a HP recovery debuffer. So if there is an enemy that uses HP recovery, Ghost Amadeus is pretty good versus that. She also decreases special defense as well, so a little bit niche in that situation. Remove status abnormalities on allies, which is pretty nice. This can be useful in arena sometimes. And then boost special attack of self. This is kind of useless. She doesn't deal a ton of damage. It's actually not terrible, but it's not a ton. We'll put her niche, just because there's not a ton of use for her. Canis. I actually just pulled Canis when I was going for Gwen, which was kind of nice. I haven't really looked too much into Canis. She's a defense, or she's a debuff unit. Decreased physical attack. That's not important. Oh, she's a cursed unit. Curses aren't that useful. Curses actually kind of use. The only situation Curse is useful currently is arena defense. So you can put her on your arena defense team. If she curses their physical DPS is probably going to kill themselves. So that is where that curse is particularly useful. She also removes all target focus. So if somebody has Bankai and they have Perseus on their team, you can remove those taunts and allow your DPS to kind of avoid Bankai and attack a different unit, which is kind of useful. I'm going to put her in niche. She'll be up here in niche. Michelangelo B is going to be way up here in niche because in arena defense, he is kind of insane. Lex is going to be A tier. Where to put him on the A tier though? Lex passively gives physical attack and special attack just for basically existing. So when there are one or more debuff allies and one or more attack allies, you know, a well-rounded comp, you just get 2,000 physical attack and special attack. So he can work on both a special team and a physical team, which is really nice. These two are more niche. They increase the time to break panels, which is a good effect. This one gives Debuff Slayer, which is kind of a common enemy type, so this is also useful as well. This one gives you a barrier. Barriers are not useful in my opinion, so that not heavily weighted, but you basically always have panel lengthen buff, which is just kind of a nice bonus. It's really his passive that just flat 2,000 extra every round is just kind of insane. So since he doesn't have much besides his passive going for him, we're going to put him behind Kojiro. Now we are back at Gareth. Gareth is an interesting unit. Decreases special attack. She's an anti-mage unit. So going versus mage comps, this is kind of where Gareth shines. So if there is a mage boss or an arena you're going versus Wang Gang or another mage team, she can decrease their special attack by a ton. She does decrease physical defense, so giving your physical attackers the ability to kill those mages. decrease special attack Slayer, so you decrease their special attacks with your abilities here, and then you give the Slayer to your DPS, and they'll go and kill the special enemies. When there are 4 more physical type allies, decrease special attack. So she is really anti-mage. Versus mages, she's probably A tier if there's versus mages, but most other compositions she's going to be in B tier. I don't really have a particular position for her, so we're just going to throw her there at the end. And I think that this looks pretty good for the tier list. This should have every unit in the game as of right now, which is what, November 10th. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with this. If you like to see more content like this, leave a comment for me. I'm pretty new at making content, especially voiceover content in general. Alice Fiction is my main game that I play, but I could make content for a couple of other games. If there's any suggestions you have, always leave them down in the comments there, and I will definitely see them. Since it's a super small channel, any comments you leave, I'm definitely going to read. I think that's all. Have a great day. Peace. I guess like and subscribe if you want. Probably not going to get consistent videos if you do that, but if you want, hey, more power to you.